Welcome back to the channel Break from Fear with Terry Pickens. This is a channel that provides an education regarding humanity living in what I call survival mode. And for those of you who don't understand that, it's really any anxiety, but specifically fear and living in fear. And it's okay to have fear and anxiety, but it has to be momentary. It has to be a moment in time where you're under threat and you're wired by your creator to survive that. Because if you don't overcome that threat, you're not alive, and then you have no goals, nothing matter. The goal is to live, and living is the opposite of survival mode. So today I would like to talk about a symptom of survival mode called addictions. And specifically, I'm looking at an addiction myth. Addiction has long been understood to mean an uncontrollable habit of using a substance, for example, drugs or alcohol. But because of the physical effects of these substances on the body, and particularly on the brain, people have often thought that real quote unquote addictions only happens when people regularly use these substances in large quantities or large amounts. But more recently, we have come to realize that people can also develop addictions to behaviors. For example, religion, cutting coupons, work, gambling, and people can even become addicted to quite ordinary and necessary activities such as dieting, exercise, eating. What these activities have in common is that the person doing them finds them comforting, pleasurable in some sort of way. There's controversy about which of the behavioral addictions constitute scientifically validated, quote unquote, true addictions, with both the professionals and the public failing to reach an agreement. However, just research is not going to clarify this issue. You have to trust God to reveal things He wants us to know. The Holy Bible says, "Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the philosopher of his age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world?" This is 1 Corinthians 1. And although the precise symptoms vary from one addiction to another, in clarifying what is an addiction, which is simply any obsessive compulsive behavior, there are two aspects to all addiction. Firstly, there's the addictive behavior. It's maladaptive, or it's counterproductive to the individual. Instead of helping the person adapt to situations or overcome their problems, it tends to undermine these abilities. So, for example, a religious addict might wish he had the miracles, quote unquote, associated with Jesus in the Bible. Yet religion is more likely to drain his spiritual resources. Why? Because time is not spent developing his spiritual self, but it's spent in unabated worship, which makes his God an idol and not a living God. It would be the same as a sex addict who may crave intimacy, yet the focus on the sexual act may prevent real closeness from developing. As always, I want to keep the video short, so I've given you the second part, and this is part 1 of addiction. We'll continue with 2 later in the week. The second part, where we talked about obsessive compulsive behavior, the behavior is persistent. When someone is addicted, they continue to engage in the addictive behavior, despite it causing them trouble in many areas of their life. So an occasional weekend of self-indulgence is not an addiction, although it may cause different kinds of problems. An addiction involves more frequent engagement in the behavior over long periods of time, and it must relieve psychological distress. And as we know, with survival mode, we have plenty of psychological physical issues, just loads and loads of symptoms of living survival mode. This is part one of addiction. Part two will continue shortly. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment about anything you know about addiction, and I will happily bring you more. Thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.